courses all try certain courses start and encapsulate in other courses. In terms of courses that have either stopped or the technical detail of each course. If the technical detail of the course is required, why it started and why it stopped, I would have to first consult.
For the sake of clarity and edification of the commission, are we talking about let's go back, the support that we talked about in the first column, above column, is it pertaining to the frequent and to the submarine or both of them?
I indicated that is the acquaintanceship, just general acquaintanceship of the ship, where we take people through and acquaint them with the ship.
Below
Chair, that course refers to the Combat Management Suite, and it is the technical maintainer of the Combat Management Suite course.
Something interesting towards the end, there is only one course where for the whole approximately 8 years there's been an activity. Let's look at towards the end, OYSOPS. I hope the commissioners will be with us. OYSOPS. OPS already knows to do operations now. OYSOPS. OYSOPS, for instance, 26, it's 3, 20, 07, 10, 2008, 4, 2009, 8, 2010, 6, 2011, 6, or I beg your pardon, 2012, nothing, and I stand corrected. 2013, 11. What is that?
Chairperson, that is the Oxroom Maintainer Communications course.
I could take you to all these activities and courses, include training and waste time, but for the sake of experience, let's go to the conclusion now, because we already know that these are courses, some of which, and fairly speaking, we did not go and apply a mind and find out what they stand for. Some you could talk to them. I can see that there's FS guns. I know you can talk to them because it's part of brigade, especially with that it's all fighting capability. That we call the combat suite. But let's look at the totals now. At the bottom, 2006, 10 corps. Let's say 2007, how many?
61, Chairperson.
2008,
76 persons, Chair.
I wanted to talk to 2009 to 2013, not record how many were trained.
Chair, in the following years, 250 in 2008, I beg your pardon, in 2009, 183 in 2010, 151 in 2011, 358 in 2012, and 102 so far this year, bringing to a total 1,181 persons trained.
Let's go to the right column, headed combat. What's the relationship between the heading combat in relation to the abbreviations? To the left, we can start with the first one, both Cox Sway part 1. Please take part 1 and part 2 together so that we should save time. And one notes that in the second activity, because the first part 1 is an activity throughout. Let's start with both Cox Sway part 1, 2006 to 2013, there's an activity. Please take us through that.
Chairperson, as in the preceding tables, this list refers to various courses that have been offered, and these are all in this particular table for persons that are in the combat branch. And both coxswain part 1 and 2 are in two such courses. The coxswain of the ship is the person who actually steers the ship when it enters or leaves port or is involved in specific seamanship type evolutions.
Before you even look at both coxswain part 1 is AIO. And you see that there's an activity throughout with 0 for 2006, 87, 2007, continues 0, 2010, 0, 2011, 0, 2012, 0, 2020. What does AIO stand for? At the top, just above old course, when you talk about the first item under the conduct.
Chairperson, it stands for Action Information Officer. Sorry, my apologies, Action Information Organization.
In simple terms, what does that mean?
Chair, the ops room of the ship is where combat information is assimilated, and we term it action information. But another word would be combat information, the flow of information relating to the fighting of the vessel.
I want us to expedite the testimony. One can see activities in the record reflect in relation to the courses to the left and the yes. But towards the end, I see a lot of telecoms, PT1. What's the bottom? Telecoms, PT2, telecoms, radio, PT3. I beg your pardon, it's not telecoms, PT1. It's telecoms, radio, PT1, telecoms, radio, PT2, telecoms, radio, PT3, telecoms, tech, PT1, telecoms, tech, PT2, telecoms, tech, PT3. Please take them together and explain why are they populated and they're significant under the heading combat.
Chairperson, the part 1, 2, and 3 again refer in each case to the level, entry-level course, middle supervisor and senior supervisor course. And then in terms of telecommunications, we have 2 specific fields, radio and tactical. The radio are the operators of your high-frequency radios, your UHF and VHF radios, and when I say operate them, they provide the radio linkages through which a ship communicates ashore. The tactical operators, which is the telecoms tactical, they are the people who physically communicate inter-ship on the tactical nets, as opposed on the more long-distance and telex nets. The tactical nets are voice nets, and also now data nets, where the others are more teleprinter and email type nets.
I want to direct attention to the middle, almost middle of the combat table. There is nothing starting in the beginning, below link, CTR, SYS, tech, below it is MEC 1, fire 5, SYS, for the suspending for systems. Below that is MEC 1, prop systems. Below that is MEC 1, ships systems. Now, those 3 courses draw my attention because they are nothing. There's nothing for the years up until 2012 and 2013. What's the cost for and why is it so empty up until 2012 and 2013?
Chairperson, it is so because whilst those courses were originally envisaged and therefore placed on the system as courses, if we go back to the previous table, you'll see those same courses now under technical, because the nature of those courses are that they're more technical. So the musterings that are taught them today are technical musterings, and so roughly about 2/3 from the bottom up on the previous table, you'll see mechanical firefighting system, mechanical propulsion system, mechanical ship systems.
Something that draws my attention is also the radar just below that. after navigators, yeoman, it's radar, ACT, I beg your pardon, radar, info P1, radar part 2, AL or AF, radar part 3, AL. It's only in 2006, 2007, and the rest becomes empty. Just talk to what is that cost for, and why is it so empty? It only starts in the beginning, and what today, as we testify, is nothing.
Chairperson, this is a particular course that was there to teach people to operate radar systems, and again, part 1, part 2, part 3, and I have to go through in detail to check now, but we have changed that from radar operators to the combat management course, the CMC. So it's a course that has gone into abeyance, but it's reflected here because there were people trying actually in those courses.
Now, where do we see the mirror and the reflection of the CMC cost we're talking about, the combat management cost in this table?
Chairperson, you'll start seeing the combat courses. Firstly, for officers, where you see Surface Warfare Elective, SWE, about quarter from the bottom. There's Surface Warfare Elective Action Organization, that's one of them. Surface Warfare Elective Command and Control, Communications and Computers, another one. The combat suite, the sensor systems, the weapon systems. So these are the way in which certain courses have evolved. Those are particularly with regards to officers, but selected senior ratings also do it. Another one is just above halfway, where it says CMS, FHG CMS Bridging, and there was one course run in 2008.
The same. For instance, if you look at what you were reading, SWE was the SWE Action Info OMG, SWE C3 and computers, SWE Combat Suite. You know, Combat Suite is a war-fighting area of vessels, whether it be a submarine or a frigate, SWE Sensor Systems. The pattern is the same, SWE Weapon Systems. Nothing in 2006, nothing in 2007, nothing in 2008, nothing in 2009, something in 2010, coincidental, we have the World Cup, 2011, 2012, 2013, why is that so?
Chair, we train according to our requirements, and we train according to the availability of people. If there are no persons available, then the course will not run, or if there is not a requirement. Once you train these young persons, they will go after their training to serve for the next 3 to 4 years in those various capacities. And then you'll wait until the next batch comes through. But specifically with regards to each of these courses, if I'm to answer why a particular course has not run in a particular year, Chair, then I need to go and prepare to get that data. It was not part of the preparation coming here to say what courses have run, as opposed to why has a course not run.
Fair enough. We thought that we could provide that detail, but now let's address ourselves to the theme of your testimony. The theme of your testimony is not to explain why the courses did not run for some years. It was just to explain the crewing of these capabilities and the training that accompanied. If I may ask, when you refer to the radar ACT Info P1, 3-1, radar part 2A1, radar part 3A1, referring to the submarines or to the frigates?
Chair, all the courses on this sheet refers to training primarily for the submarine, for the frigate. This is frigate training that is before us on page 91. All of this training can be utilized for the submarines. As I indicated, there isn't a separate catering course, for instance, for a submariner vis-a-vis a frigate. The tactical radio operator, the telecoms radio, that's standard across all vessels. But the frigate technical training is not reflected on this. The submarine technical training is not reflected on this page.
Let us complete by looking at the last three items at the bottom, just to complete the picture. For instance, you'll see weapons operator P1, weapons operator P2, flight deck handler. Let's start with weapons operator P1. 0 in 2006, 11 2007, 18 2008, 40 2009, 20 29 15, 2013 0. Why is it so essential? It was population here. If you are able to tell the commission.
I can only indicate, Chair, that those were the numbers of persons that were trained. The weapon operators is an entry-level type course for persons that will be operating the various weapons. And when I say weapons here, these are the guns on the ship, essentially. And they will operate the guns. They're larger numbers because the ship has, as part of its outfit, it's got two 2mm machine guns, it's got two 12.7 machine guns, and then it's got the 76mm and the dual-purpose 35. So there are a number of guns on board the ship, and each of them have operator serving. So generally, the numbers would be higher in the gunnery branch.
Then below that is weapons operator P2. What's the distinction between the two?
When you get to the part 2, you start moving into the managerial or control side, and that's why you would also generally find that your part 2 numbers are less than your part 1 numbers when it comes to the operating versus the control.
And please come to the last one, the flight deck handler.
The chairperson, these are the people that work on the flight deck, and they are responsible for managing the helicopter when it lands or takes off from the flight deck, tie it down.
We know that in South Africa we have 3 arms services, the Army, the Navy, and the Air Force. For the edification of the Commission, I know you know this. These persons who are flight deck handler, in line with the testimony that we have heard, that helicopter belongs to the Air Force, is that correct?
That is correct, Chair.
But because it's on the vessel, it's under the command of the Navy, isn't it?
Chairperson, the manner in which it works is that the helicopter, as correctly stated, belongs to the Air Force. When it flies on board, the helicopter comes under the operational control of the officer commanding. Normally speaking, we embark what we call a mobile air ops team, which is an element provided by the Air Force, and they will form the link between the ship's captain or the task force commander and the air crew. Now, it is so that if it's a very small type operation or limited scope in anticipated utilization, that the pilot of the helicopter can also fulfill that dual hat responsibility of the mobile air ops team commander. So typically He reports via the entity to the captain, but in fact that entity may be himself at times.
The flight deck handler under whose command are they?
The flight deck handlers are part of the ship's company, and they stand under the command of the ship's captain.
Are they on the ship under the auspices of the Air Force or under the auspices of the Navy?
They are totally under the auspices of the Navy, Chair.
Now, let's complete your testimony on this page by putting to the totals. Please address the totals starting from 2006 to 2013.
Chairperson, with regards to combat personnel, in 2006 we trained a total of 255, 2007 260, 2008 287, 2009 478, 2010 366, 2011 368, 2012 286, and 2013 104, bringing us total train to 2,204 to date, Chair.
I would like us to go back to your statement. And let's go back to the beginning of paragraph 24 so that we should appreciate what you testified about. Might take the debate to relate to you. Turning now to the issue of crewing the frigates and submarines. Over the period 2005 to 2013, the SA Navy has trained some 4042 personnel, 647 support personnel, 191 technical personnel, and 2204 combat personnel. We've just demonstrated that now. The total is 4042. I refer to the document attached Annex Check. PS10 that we've just talked about. It is from these that the frigates, submarines, and other vessels have been crewed. Despite this investment in training, critical shortages are still being experienced in the mechanical engineering master. Let's pause there. Why is that so?
Chair, there's a number of reasons. The one reason is that people do not volunteer to undergo technical training as readily as they volunteer to undergo non-technical training. And then secondly, those that do volunteer and do qualify are very soon offered alternative employment by the broader economy, given that they have these specific skills which are in short supply throughout the country.
I think it's just qualified that they're explaining on your statement that they are being coached, once qualified, and team members volunteering for submarine service. These are being addressed and the situation is expected to continue to improve. How is that being addressed?
Chairperson, with regards to the technical personnel in general, firstly, there has been an occupational dispensation created for them in the recent months, whereby which they will be remunerated slightly better than before. I do not believe personally that this will stop the full hemorrhaging, but it will address it to a degree. And then secondly, with regards to the submariners, we have relaxed our own internal rules and are now, rather than taking persons out of school, putting them through the initial basic military training that we do, and thereafter sending them for 3 years to do the apprenticeship training at our technical schools. We now try to recruit persons who have already attained the academic side of their technical training, bringing them into the Navy, doing a very short bridging conversion and thereafter employing them at the rank that they would have attained had they come in and gone up the line to the point where they would have arrived to serve on board a frigate. So in essence, direct recruitment of qualified people outside accelerated advancement in order to make up the numbers. Currently, and I stand corrected in terms of numbers, one or two either way, roughly 68 people in this specific dispensation, and a further more than 100 that we have recruited internally in the Navy and are now putting on an accelerated training program.
Mr. Comte, as a result, it has not been possible to staff each ship and submarine fully with qualified personnel at all times. Is that currently happening as you have testified before the Commission?
Chairperson, yes, that is true. Not all the ships or submarines have every single post on board filled by somebody who is fully qualified.
What about the frigates?
That applies equally to the frigates, Chairperson.
Let's complete. However, it has been possible to ensure that the laid down minimal seagoing standards have been met. Just qualify that.
Chairperson, the issue of having 100% staff complement within the Navy is not something new. This is something which has existed from the time when I joined the Navy. Now, when we design the crew tables or the establishment table of a warship, you design that establishment table with the mind that the primary task of any warship is to fight at sea. And so the crew needs to be able to man every piece of equipment that would be utilized when you're fighting the ship. Ships generally fight two battles. We talk about the internal and the external war. The external war is the war you fight against the enemy. The internal war is the war that you fight against battle damage that you may suffer, fire, flooding, and the likes. And so ships generally have a very comprehensive crew to both fight the internal and the external battle. However, in peacetime, we recognize that the ship is unlikely to be fighting. And therefore, it is unlikely that every member that's used for war would be needed on board at all times in peacetime. However, at the same time, you have to make sure that when a ship goes to sea, it is safe to do so from a navigation point of view, from operating its equipment, and, of course, the ever-present risk of fire and flood. And so, per ship in class, every ship of class, we have what we call a minimum seagoing standard. And you're not allowed to crew the ship below that standard because that is the minimum number needed to ensure the safety of that ship at sea in the non-combat zone. So, by way of example, and we spoke about the weapons operators earlier, and this is not factual numbers, this is by way of example. If the ship's company calls for 10 weapons operators during a war situation, and you only have 8 weapons operators now in peacetime, your minimum seagoing standard would, for instance, say there must be a minimum of 5 weapons operators. So if you're at 8, that ship is safe to proceed to sea under non-threat conditions. Which I've tried to encapsulate the whole idea of minimum crews, safety standards, and where we have been at present.
Now, you testified that the issue of short staffing and tweaking numbers to meet these standards has been happening even during the terms of the Deadly submarines, that is the ones that came before the Type 209 submarines, the current ones which had it the same with the frigates, type Perm frigates, the Den frigates against the men? Is that applicable both ways?
Chairperson, certainly in my 42 years service, this has been applicable, that we have minimum seagoing standards and that we have full wartime standards that we need, and that we have operated somewhere in between these standards for most of the time.
Let's go to the final paragraph. In conclusion, I refer to the document attached at marked Annexure PS11, one page, page 92, Commissions. This is extracted from the 2013 South African Defense Review. I believe that it well illustrates the goals and tasks of the Defense Force and the need for it to maintain its forces. General Shock, the Chief of the SABC, will fully come and talk to the 2013 Defense Review to demonstrate its relevance in line with the subject of the SPPP packages today. But please go to page 92. Now, the relevance of this page, one sees that it is headed Defense Goals and Tasks. Now, there's Goal 1 to Goal 4. I would like you to take the commission by demonstrating what's the distinction between Goal 1, Goal 2, in relation to Goal 3, Goal 4. It means let's call Goal 1, Goal 2 the left goals, and Goal 3 and Goal 4 the right goals. Please start by identifying the goal, explaining the sequence below it, and come to Goal 2, explain the sequence and pause, and draw the commission's attention about the distinction between Goal 1, Goal 2 in relation to Goal 3, Goal 4. You may start by identifying the goals.
Thank you, Chair. To contextualize the page as a whole, firstly, this diagram stemmed from an unpacking of the defense mandate as has been previously presented. And in unpacking that mandate, the Defense Review Committee identified that the mandate would point to 4 high-level goals that the Defence Force needs to accomplish if it is to accomplish its mandate. And the first goal that was identified, and is one that we've touched on in giving testimony here, is the goal of defend and protect South Africa. The second high-level goal was the need to safeguard South Africa, and one will touch on the difference between defend and protect and safeguard as I proceed. The third goal had to do with promote peace and security, and the fourth goal, if I may, is the developmental and other audit tasks. So one can draw a parallel between this diagram and what I mentioned earlier about the Booth triangle, that there's this ranging from benign type tasks to constabulary type tasks to warfighting tasks. And this is just a different presentation. Chair, with your permission, if I then go to Goal 1, to defend and protect South Africa, what are the tasks that the Defence Force and hence also the Navy and the Air Force should do in order to accomplish that goal? Well, the ultimate, of course, is to deter and to prevent conflict. It would be the best if there never was conflict, and if conflict should start to emanate from some source, if one could then deter it. And I've alluded to the fact that the mere presence of a military capability already of itself provides deterrence. The second task is that the country, in line with every other country, has particular national interests, and it is the part in defending and protecting South Africa to also protect our national interests. However, such national interests may be articulated by the government of the day. Regrettably, there is always the possibility that deterrence and conflict prevention may not succeed, and that a country may be called upon to defend itself either in consort with allies or unilaterally. And so the third task that the National Defence Force, and hence the name is Prepared Forces for, is to defend South Africa. Whereas one can say that deterrence can be accomplished by being ready alongside providing a deterrence, by the time it comes to defending, it means physically deploying in combat type situations. Chairperson, the second task is very closely aligned, but is a step less, step away from the full war fighting. If we could go to safeguarding South Africa, the first task there is to safeguard our borders. We all know that porous borders leads to persons crossing them with impunity. It leads to the smuggling of goods, contraband over those borders. It leads to the smuggling of people across those borders, narcotics and the likes. So it is important that you safeguard your borders. And these borders, Chairperson, can refer to land borders, but they also equally refer to sea borders and, I dare say, the airspace, which can be transgressed by persons smuggling or contraband people or narcotics in and out. So that is another type of task, and I would like to come back to that. Chairperson, then task 5 speaks to safeguarding critical infrastructure. And much has been said in the past about the National Key Points Act, and I believe there will be a debate on it shortly again. But there is critical infrastructure even at sea, or critical infrastructure that is vulnerable from the sea. Much of our fuel gets imported. There are mooring buoys off the coast where the supertankers come and tie up and then pump the crude oil ashore, where they are then refined for our utilization as petroleum gas products. If that piece of infrastructure is sabotaged, removed or damaged, the effect on the economy would be tremendous. We also have a nuclear power station, Coburg in the Cape, which is vulnerable from the seaside. And so one can mention other critical infrastructure. One thinks of the dams of this country, even dams in neighboring countries like the Katsi. These are critical items of infrastructure that defense can and will probably be called upon should the need ever arise. Chair, task 6, support to the police service. There are many tasks that we do to support the police in crime combating, and that is one of the tasks whereby which we safeguard South Africa. And again, the range is big, from assisting them with air transport, air surveillance for big events, to taking police to sea to inspect suspected drug runners and the likes. The last task is possibly one that is less known but equally important and growing in importance worldwide, and that is to ensure information security, the whole arena of cyber security and cyber attack. And one can just imagine even something as mundane as an attack on the traffic lights in a city like Joburg, what the impact would be on traffic flow. And so one can carry on looking at things like cargo handling at a major port, if all the cargo was suddenly scrambled in terms of where it was. The banking institutions and defense is involved in assisting in the broader provision of cybersecurity. Chairperson, the third goal differs again, and this goes to promoting peace and security, has a soft side on the one hand and a slightly more military side on the other. When it comes to promoting strategic influence, this is the realm of defense attaches. We promote your defense force in the countries where they serve. We promote the stance. We diffuses questions that one may have aggressive intention when you do not have. So, and also the realm, and we spoke about it this morning, of goodwill visits, where you use your assets to promote your influence abroad. Task 9, one that is very often in the news, to contribute to peace and stability, Chair, that refers primarily to our contribution to UN and AU peace missions. The contention being that for us to enjoy peace and prosperity here, there needs to be peace and prosperity further afield on this continent and indeed in the rest of the world. The forces that we use there are primarily at this stage land forces. We do too deploy elements of the Air Force and currently have some support personnel from the Navy. But certainly very much a role that the defense can play to support the government in its peace and security initiatives. Chairperson, the last goal, developmental and other audit tasks. One of the audit tasks is compliance with treaty obligations, and we've mentioned things like hydrography. We've mentioned things like search and rescue, but there are also others which deal with munitions like test-ban treaties, non-proliferation of small arms, and these are areas where the defense has a role to play. I've touched on very briefly audit presidential tasks, but for the Defence Force as a whole, we look after certainly the travelling when our President, Deputy President travels internationally. That's an audit presidential task. Our military health services provide health services to our Commander-in-Chief and Deputy. And so the Defence Force has a role to play in certain tasks as ordered by the President. Chair, Task 12 goes to assisting civil authority when we audit. And this can take many different forms, and indeed does. It can go from when there are times of civil unrest where the police would request assistance so that they can do their work. It would go to events where we assist the police. But it can also include things like building bridges, as we have done in the Eastern Cape, so that communities that are cut off through floods can get succor, children can go to school. And there really are a range of civil authority tasks that we assist with. One of the large tasks we've done for many years, and it recurs, is looking when there are outbreaks of disease amongst livestock, like swine fever, bovine illnesses. And the last task, which goes to contributing to the general development of our people, and here we look not only at specific missions that we do, but in the type of training that we provide. We assist in a large way to train people that can move on out of the defense into industry, etc., the National Youth Service, where we take in, certainly for the Navy I can speak, upwards of 1,000 people every year, train them for 3 months, return them to the department that's sponsoring them so that they have a basic enablement to find employment. Chair, therefore, the military is about ships, submarines, and aircraft. It is about war fighting, but it's also about much more in fulfilling its constitutional mandate. It is about providing safety for us in our homes through border security. It is about us providing or assisting the government in its effort to bring peace to this continent of ours. And then it is about meeting the commitments that we have as part of the international order. And last but importantly, it is also about us serving the people and seeking how we can assist to development. So even as there's a balanced portfolio of tasks that we have to accomplish in order to achieve the goals that we derive from our mandate, in the same way, there's a balanced portfolio of capabilities that we require to accomplish us in achieving these various goals. Thank you, Chair.
I would like you to take the SBPP packages that we have acquired. This is an instance where I allow you to put your cap on, not as a naval officer, but as a member of the South African National Defence Force. You can take the Griffins and the Hawks that we purchased for the Air Force and these light utility helicopters. You can take the frigates, corvettes, and the submarines. Put them in order. Demonstrate to the Commission the order of their use for Goal 1, Goal 2, Goal 3, Goal 4. Demonstrate to the Commission that if you look at Goal 1 in relation to having that is the soft issue, a hard issue, you need them. Goal 2, you need them less. Goal 3, you need them lesser or you need them more. Goal 4, you need them lesser or you need them more.
Chair, possibly, if I understood correctly, I must speak to both the Navy's assets and the Air Force assets that are under consideration by the Commission. So, if that is correct, I will start with a walk to say, primarily, or not primarily, its first function is to train pilots to fly fighters. So, whatever I may say with the Gripen will apply to the walk on the basis that it's the lead into flying the Gripen. And thereafter I will add other tasks as well. If one looks at Goal 1, one certainly could not do Task 3 without frigates, submarines, Gripens, and bear in mind I've indicated the Hawk would train you up to fly the Gripen, so therefore the Hawk would be there in that context. If one looks at Task 2, protecting national interests, the same would apply to the forces I've just mentioned, and with Task 1, likewise, the same would apply. All that obviously predicated on that there is a threat, or that you want to prevent a threat from developing. If I look at Goal 2, Chairperson, when it comes to safeguarding the borders, the frigate can be utilized, certainly, and the submarine can be utilized. Probably not the optimum in terms of cost of operating certain of them. We could use a lesser capability. Safeguarding critical infrastructure. Oh, and in terms of the border, if one talks about your air borders under times of threat, both the Gripen and the Hawks can be used for that as well, to fly patrols of those border areas if there is a threat. When it comes to safeguarding critical infrastructure, probably more with regards to the A109 and the Hawk aircraft and possibly the frigate in that sequence. Support to the police service, primarily the helicopter and the frigate, but I need to indicate that when it was big events like Soccer 2010, then all the assets were utilized. So it depends really what the specific task is. So the ensuring information security, I would say, really falls outside the gambit of these particular assets. Promoting strategic influence, as defined in terms of the defence review, I believe the frigate would be the primary capability of these that we're discussing to be utilised. Contributing to peace and stability, Chairperson, I see a vast role, certainly for the Gripens and the Hawks, if one goes into Chapter 7 and Chapter 8 type UN operations. One does not want to run ahead of the findings of what happened in Bangui, but that type of event that took place, those capabilities, as would the 109s in terms of communications aircraft, would have contributed vastly to them. Chairperson, as far as Goal 4 is concerned, depending on the type of operation, Task 12, certainly the light utility aircraft would be very useful, as well as a frigate, but I say depending on the task. The ordered presidential tasks, primarily I'd say the frigate, possibly the light utility aircraft, and treaty obligations in terms of current treaties, probably the frigate would be the primary vessel utilized in terms of the search and rescue role. It's difficult to state categorically because each of these has many permutations, but I believe that's a fair representation of where one can see the utilization of these assets. But I believe, Chair, more importantly is one asks the question, in the absence of these assets, what would you utilize?
Yes, I know that I took in an area you expect, but it discharged that responsibility. I know that my colleagues will be dealing with the Air Force, but of significance, they've demonstrated that all these goals can be met by these capabilities. Is that correct?
Chairperson, I've tried to demonstrate that these capabilities can be utilized in each one of these to achieve these goals. I did not try to indicate that these capabilities could achieve them to the exclusion of other capabilities, because each of these goals can have many variations, some landward, for instance. But yes, these capabilities can be utilized under specific conditions in each one of these.
And when I listened to your testimony, it demonstrated that goal 1 and goal 2, as against goal 3 and goal 4, could be met differently because goal 1 and goal 2 are real-hard issues. To defend and protect South Africa, to safeguard South Africa. You need, I think, the real hardcore capability. Demonstrated that goal 3 and goal 4 are benign sort of issues. For instance, to go and assist in Mozambique when there are floods, to go and demonstrate to the South African youth our capabilities in making them sentimental and rural hits, took us and demonstrated that how excited youth were when they saw these capabilities. It demonstrated to us how sentimental the former Premier of the Eastern Cape was in seeing estates mending, recycling the prime point. In conclusion, with this background that I've laid, would you agree that these capabilities could be applied differently, looking at goal 1, gravitating to goal 4.
That is correct, Chair.
In the 15 minutes, we'll complete your testimony. I'm confident. There are 3 questions that I would like you to address, and we'll be done with the testimony. Remember, when you started your testimony, we wanted to refer you to a very sensitive, classified detail under the topic operational availability of surface platform. Do you remember?
I do, Chair.
Now, that part talks about, generally, I've got to be careful, the deficiencies and the limitations that arise created by mechanical problems and other challenges in as far as the frigates now, the frigates and the submarines are concerned. Now you have your cap on as a naval officer. Is that correct?
I do, Chair.
Do you want to talk about it fully, or do you want to talk about it in passing, given the limitations that are there? You've been honest, you took us into your confidence about it, and I even addressed the commissioners about it. There was a suggestion that we could deal with it on every day. But let's deal with it to an extent to which you could, if you are comfortable. You could deal with it in passing and address the commission regarding those deficiencies and limitations.
Thank you, Chair. If I may, I will this time start with the submarine. And I have already testified to the issue surrounding the power unit that was incorrectly connected and which was subsequently repaired. A second area with regards to the submarine that has been in the public domain has been the question around batteries for the submarines. And here I need to indicate that batteries roughly have a 7 to 8 year lifespan. That is also why we refit our submarines approximately every 8 years, because by that point in time, batteries need to be replaced. There was an issue with the batteries. This was not an issue that was limited to this country. We discovered that there was a build-up of gas in the battery, and Chairperson, gas in the form of hydrogen in a confined space like a submarine is high risk. And so when this was discovered, a repair solution was investigated and was brought about on our submarine batteries. This was also brought to the attention of the original equipment manufacturer, who has subsequently addressed this in his production of this item. The Navy has, in the interim, sourced its next generation, or let's say a replacement battery, when the batteries have to be replaced from an alternative supplier. So that, in as much as the issue around batteries. So whether there was a defect identified or not, we are at the 8-year period now, so we would be replacing batteries anyway. But we did discover a problem. I have indicated the issue of water ingress on that land, which was one of the defects that we picked up. That was repaired. There was one incident on one of the submarines in which it made contact with the ground whilst doing evolutions, and that has been repaired. This has also been reported to the Portfolio Committee during their visit. Aside from these visible defects, I guess, Chair, it is true to say that in the normal course of operations from time to time, systems do go down and they are repaired by the persons operating the vessels on board or ashore. But it is fair to say that the submarines have been very reliable in general and that they've served us well. I'm always proud to say that the vessel that went to Brazil spent 63 days at sea and came back without reporting a single defect. And I think with that, I'd like to conclude as far as the submarines are concerned. As far as the frigates are concerned, Chairperson, these are very technical vessels, and possibly I'll start on the other side and say, yes, in the normal course of operating, there have been certain defects, and there's also been those defects that have been reported further up the line, also into Parliament, and here I will touch on the port diesel of one of the vessels, the Amatola, which had water ingress in June 2008, and for which we have purchased a replacement engine that will be installed during the ship's upcoming refit. Then there has been questions that we have raised internally with regards to lube oil overheating on these vessels. We do not yet have the full answer. Why? In part, we believe it's because of the temperatures of the oceans where we're operating up north. It is a matter that is still outstanding to be resolved, so I would not like to give a definitive answer to that. Furthermore, this morning the evidence leader asked a specific question about the frigate engines. Chairperson, I alluded to the number of engines that are in circulation. We discovered on two of our ships that we had coolant leaking on the engines, and when we took this up with the manufacturer, they indicated this was a matter of design where a certain component worked loose. They had already identified it within, and in fact that is true because when we applied the corrective measures, we found that one of the ships had already been modified, and so as a warranty item, the manufacturer has replaced, or in this case, removed this component which is not required, but which, if left in situ, leads to excess coolant buildup. And that, in line, has been the more visible type of defects. Thank you.
Your Worship, these capabilities are almost 8 to 9 years old, is that correct?
That is correct, Chair.
By now, there must have been much left, isn't it?
Chairperson, as I indicated, it takes many years to master, and we are still identifying areas that are only now evidencing themselves. As I indicated, the lube oil, not the lube oil, the coolant leak evidenced itself 2011 for the first time. And I cannot categorically state that something else may not evidence itself for the first time in the months to come. But if so, we will deal with it on a case-by-case basis.
OEM, a term that we use, the original equipment manufacturer. Is that correct?
Chair, can you just repeat the statement, question?
We know that the frigates were manufactured by the German Frigate Consortium. Is that correct?
That is correct, Chair.
The submarines are also from Germany, isn't it?
That is also correct, Chair.
There's a relationship between the Germans and the South African Navy, and I call the Germans the original equipment manufacturer in relation to these capabilities, isn't it?
That is correct, Chair.
At this stage, after 8, 9 years, some of these defects can be fully addressed in South Africa. Am I correct?
Chair, that's correct.
By the way, how many engines does a submarine have?
Chair, the submarine has 2 electrical engines that drive on a single shaft.
How many propellers?
It has 1 propeller, Chair.
For the edification of the Commission, what's the difference between an engine and a propeller?
Chair, the propeller is the effector which is in the water, which when turned by the engine propels the vessel forward or backward.
How many engines does the frigate have?
The frigate has got a total of 3 engines, Chairperson.
How many propellers?
It has a total of 2 propellers as well as a water jet.
You see, the critics would like to know how many do these capabilities. Let me rephrase it for this problem. Are there instances where these capabilities use less engine? To be precise, let's take the frigate. Are there times when 2 of the engines are broken and it functions with 1?
Chairperson, a design feature of warships is redundancy, so that it can operate when certain systems are lost under combat conditions or other conditions. And hence, the frigates are so configured that whilst they have 2 engines and 2 propellers, if I can start there, you can use 1 engine to drive either of the propellers or both together, and the same applies for the other. Also, as part of economical use when on passage, if we ride at economical speed, we would use 1 engine driving 2 propellers, and then after a number of hours you will change the engine and use the other engine to drive 2 propellers. There have been instances where we have lost an engine. I referred, for instance, to the July 2008, and so we drove both propellers through the other engine. We have not yet replaced that engine because we would rather have kept the ship in the operating cycle. From my earlier testimony, I indicated that the Amatola has done 2 100-plus day deployments in the Mozambique Channel, and it has done so using, in fact, 2 propellers and the 1 engine that's not affected. This is part of the design of warships to enable them to do so.
Is the same applicable as far as submarines are concerned?
Chair, I'm speaking to an area that's not my expertise, and that's the inner workings of a submarine. But the submarine has, as I indicated, 2, they call them 2 half engines, but they're 2 complete engines that drive a single shaft. You can, I need to start slightly further back maybe to explain it. The submarine is driven by the electrical engines. The electrical engines are powered by the batteries that I've referred to, and the batteries are charged by generators that are on board. So essentially, the batteries would be running the two engines. There is a method in which you can disconnect the batteries and drive electrical engines directly from the generators. Obviously only on the surface, because the generators need air. You can also disconnect the two engines from each other, but I cannot explain the technicality of that, so that you can use a so-called half engine to drive the shaft. There are, of course, limitations because it's got a single shaft and a single propeller. If you damage your shaft, it does not matter how many engines you have. Okay.
Let me hear a comment. Is it fair to conclude that, and this is a criticism, that we bring this testimony before the Commission, that these capabilities are in a position to discharge their functions, whether it's goal 1, goal 2, goal 3, goal 4, it doesn't matter. I've been present in the Mozambique Channel, by going to Chile, by going to Brazil, participating in operations and exercise your event. That's one thing. But they sometimes discharge this function with a limitation because either one engine is broken or is dysfunctional. That happens time and again, isn't it?
Chairperson, it's true that despite defects that are experienced, that we continue to discharge our function as currently ordered.
Yeah, but doesn't that mean that the critics are right to say there are limitations in as far as operations of these capabilities are concerned because they don't function at their maximum capacity, given these limitations. Remember that they discharge their function is one thing. That's one thing. They go to Mozambique, they go to China, they probably do this drug interception, interdictions. That's one thing. But they do that with limitations. Is that correct?
That is correct, Chair.
Does certain risk factors involved?
Chairperson, there are always risks at sea, and a ship that is 100% correct, by the time it leaves the harbour, you cannot guarantee that something hasn't dropped. There are inherent risks, and that is why we work to a minimum safety standard.
Fair enough. But is it more of a risk for a frigate to go into the thick of the ocean with one functioning engine? Knowing that going at sea is a risk, we know that going to sea with full capacity engines. Am I right?
Chairperson, I've indicated that ships are part of the redundancy. There are other ships ploughing the oceans of the world with a single engine. So it is true that if you have 5 engines or 3 engines or 2 engines, you have more redundancy. But the fact is, ships at sea sail on one engine, many. Our ships have got 3 engines in total. We in the Navy have appreciated that we are satisfied to safely operate the ships at the levels that we're currently operating them.
Admiral, we've come to the end of the testimony. It's 4 o'clock. I just wanted to conclude, given the challenge that we face in bringing testimony before the Commission. We have to look at the merits and the demerits inquire into and finally make recommendations. Do the critics have a point if they say, in the real virtual world where we find ourselves today, one cannot talk about war, one talks about peace. We've seen that enemies make peace. We've seen that countries that fought reconcile. One can give a plethora of examples. The tourism debate says that the world is becoming more and more a peaceful place. We can do better with diplomatic exercises. There's no need for us to waste resources and rely on these brigades, submarines that enter the oceans with the risk factor of utilizing one engine instead of full capacity. What is your comment about this reality?
Chairperson, I cannot answer for the critics. I can only answer on my observation, and my observation is that we live in an uncertain world. And in an uncertain world, you have to be prepared for every eventuality as best as you can. And those persons who predicted 1,000 years of peace after the Berlin Wall fell, I believe that they were found incorrect very shortly thereafter. Even in our own history, Bangui, nobody predicted it until it happened. The events in North Africa with the Arab Spring, no intelligence agency predicted it. And the rate at which these events have happened is certainly far faster than we could build up a capability if we had none. And therefore, I would not like to answer for the critics, but certainly I believe that we live in uncertain times and that one must be prepared for those times that we live in.
What is your conclusion in relation to the background that I played, the tourism debate, and whether we do need these capabilities?
Chairperson, I am convinced that one requires these capabilities. If time had permitted me, Chair, I'd like to have read from the Defence Review. I would have liked to have articulated what national interest is and the role of the state in preserving our national interest, and therefore how it must balance economic realities, social realities, but also security of state infrastructure, security of state institutions, and the security of the state itself. However, Chairperson, if there's ever been a truism, it is that water flows downhill. And by that, I mean that water takes the path of least resistance. And if one takes that analogy to where we are when it comes to security matters, if there is any would-be aggressor out there, he would certainly look at South Africa, if that was where the aggression was directed, and say, what is the downhill? What is the area of weakness, be it economic or other? And if it's military, what is the area of military weakness? And if he finds that weakness, one can rest assured that is the line that he would take to attack you. It would become the center of gravity or the locus of his attention. And given these uncertainties, therefore, I believe that the best option, given our modest means, is to take a balanced approach. Provide sufficient credible deterrence that a would-be aggressor would look at us from a maritime perspective and say there's risk in attacking with surface forces. There's risk in attacking with submarine forces. There's risk with attacking with air forces, and there's risk with attacking with land forces. That if we in our modest means, provide a balanced capability, then at the very least, we do not offer any area as a least line of resistance, which can become the line of attack from a would-be aggressor. Against that background, therefore, Chairperson, I believe that the strategic packages are well justified, they are necessary. I've tried to indicate how we've used them in training to hone our skills, how we've used them with other friendly nations to jointly hone our skills, and how we currently deploy them in fulfillment of some of the I recognize that there are challenges in terms of financial constraints. I've spoken to that. But in the nature of these vessels, from time to time, there will be defects, that we do have the capacity in-house and also the support of the original equipment manufacturers to repair them. And therefore, I'm confident that they will continue to serve this country into the future. Thank you.
In line with the analogy that is made, very sagacious of the downstream analysis of water. What do you think? I know that you're not in the mind of the would-be aggressor, but what do you make of the fact that the aggressor would know that our submarines do at times operate with one engine, our frigates do operate with constraints and limitations, and we know that that gets to be occasioned either by cost or budget that I suppose better qualified witnesses could come and address. Does that work to the advantage of the Navy or disadvantage of the Navy? This reality that I've just asked you about, giving that analogy that you've made.
Chair, the analogy I made indicated the requirement for balance. I am sure that potential would-be aggressors would be aware of such limitations, because we are aware that many navies have similar problems. It is nothing unusual that one operates in these days at certain levels, but at least that when there's an indication of a threat situation developing, that you can increase your funding and therefore your level of readiness. I earlier indicated as well to the Commission that currently our plan calls for only one frigate at the full or the functional level of operational capability. Yet the questions have centered on almost the same level of capability for all four frigates. As the situation changes and as the risk gets reassessed, if there's a requirement to change the level of operational capability, I'm certain that the funding to do so will be provided as part of the plan, and we then in the Navy will follow suit to raise that level of capability. Certainly, it is not unique to our Navy that one has defects from time to time. It is a worldwide phenomenon.
Chairperson, that's the end of our part of leading Admiral Schultz. I have to give over to Dr. Malima SC, yourselves, and any other party that would like to cross-examine. Noting that it is 4:10, we just want to put it on record that we are done and dusted with Admiral Schultz. And we thank you, Chair.
Although I see it's already 4, but then I would want to go on and let's see if we can finish with this. And I wanted to tell us another was to cross-examine your surety. Any explanation?
Thank you, Chair. We have about 2 or 3 key-part questions for yes. Admiral, at the beginning of your statement, you make reference to the Simon-Town agreement. I've got 2 questions related to that, please. First one, practically. Can you tell the Commission what the significance of that agreement was? That is the first part of the question. And the second part of the question is, what were the implications for the cancellation of that agreement by Bristol?
Chairperson, I believe that the significance was, firstly, that a major power recognized the importance of the sea route and the importance of the maritime defense of the sea route. First part of the significance. The second part was that through the agreement, South Africa could rely on the assistance of a much larger partner to secure the sea route should a threat develop. And also that it could acquire the assets that it would require to protect this route from that partner. There were also in the margins of that agreement extensions to other countries like the United States, but that's a different aspect. The significance of the cancellation, I believe, is the opposite of what I've just said. Suddenly, a traditional supplier of ships to the South African Navy was no longer a supplier, and we would have to look elsewhere. I may add that at that stage the doctrine in the Navy was exclusively based on British doctrine, so also from a doctrinal point we had to start developing our own. Access to all their warfare publications and the likes, that disappeared. So it was almost a rebirth of a Navy in their withdrawal. But more significantly was that now we were totally dependent on ourselves for our own protection.
Thank you. The second question, second and last question. Assume the contracts, the frigate contracts were cancelled. What would be the practical impact of that cancellation?
Chairperson, previous witnesses testified to the military type impact, that we would be bereft of any ship that had teeth in the surface warfare scenario. One must remember that we cannot refer to the strike craft today as part and parcel of this capability, in as much as that vessel has lost its missiles, it's lost its electronic component, warfare components, its gun is not connected in terms of the main gun, in terms of its weapon system. So that's a patrol boat. So we would lose a warship. That certainly has been touched on. I think as the fleet commander, I would ask myself the practical question, what part of the ship would be returned and to whom? Because I've indicated that this ship was built by a shipyard in terms of Holland machinery. It was brought to this country where a main contractor was also appointed to integrate various systems on board. And so the question I would ask now, what is being handed back to whom? Would it imply that the fire control radars, the electronic warfare systems, the dual-purpose gun, the surface-to-air missiles that were all built by South African companies, would they be stripped out of this hole, that would be returned to wherever it was being returned, and these weapons be handed back to the supplier, those suppliers? What would that do to the export of some of these systems into other navies now, if we no longer operated them? And then obviously the question goes, what would the effect be on the labour market within those companies? Or alternatively, would we just keep them? And if they were to be retained by the Navy, what would we do with them? Dispose of them as scrap, or hope that we could plug them into some other platform? It is a hypothetical question, Chairperson, but it is one that certainly does not have an easy answer.
Thank you. Is there any other thing you'd like to say to mention as a parting shot?
Chairperson, just to say that the ships do good work, and they will continue to do good work as long as they are in the employ of and service of this country. Thank you.
Just from my own understanding, earlier on I heard you saying that the submarines have been reliable and have served the Navy very well. Now, the question of the Kamadima, I hear you saying that the ships are serving you very well. When you say the ships, are you referring to all the frigates and the submarines? Or put otherwise, are you in a position to make the same statement that you made about the submarines as far as the frigates are concerned? As I said, you said that the submarines have been reliable and the same very well.
Chairperson, we've had certain deep... thank you. Chairperson, I've tried to indicate that there have been both defects on the submarines and on the surface ships. I've indicated that a submarine deployed to South America with no defects, which was highly reliable in terms of that operation. Overall, because the submarines come from a single source, and they are less complex to come to technical grips than the frigates are, and as a result of that, we have certainly had less diverse defects that we've had to contend with. I would say currently our experience has been that the submarines have probably been more reliable than the frigates, but both of them have been reliable in as much as being available to execute the tasks we've been given. Chairperson, Commissioner, yes, I believe it would be extremely complex trying to unravel what part of such a complex contracting model one was in fact cancelling and what were you in fact giving back. Do you cut down the whole tree if there's one bad fruit in the tree? I think that's what I was trying to illustrate.